Hello everyone, welcome back to Speaking Spurs. Finally, World Cup is over, interruption of Premier League football is done and dusted. Strange time of year for it. Anyone in the UK, we've had ridiculously strange weather, snow, icy conditions, and then we jumped up from, -6 all the way to 12 degrees. It's been a weird time. But yes, we are back. I've used the time to recharge and do some other things, but I am back. Tottenham have had a couple of friendlies, mid-season friendlies in the meantime, whilst the international World Cup has been on. So we're going to talk about the players from the World Cup, the winners and losers of the World Cup, a little bit about transfers, a little bit on the friendlies, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. We have all of this, and we have this, and that. So there's quite a bit to get through, so I'm going to try and race through some of the stuff. I've also got a few stories that I've got on the computer screen behind the camera to talk about as well. So let's talk about the World Cup itself and the winners and losers in Qatar. Obviously, outright winner, Argentina, of which we had a player not only in the squad, but a heavy part of the squad in Christian Romero. Former Spurs player Juan Foyth was in the squad. Only managed, I think he managed about 10 minutes throughout the whole tournament for them. He came on towards the end of one of the group stage games, I think it was. And we would have had Giovanni Lo Celso in there, who was a massive part of them winning the Copa America. But due to injury, he wasn't able to be there for this. So, all in all, 11 Spurs players made their way for the first ever winter version of the tournament. And in the end, they all departed the competition one by one until there was only Hugo Lloris and Christian Romero left to do battle on Sunday afternoon for France and Argentina. So we were represented across more countries playing at the World Cup than any other club in the world. Although we didn't have the most players at the World Cup, but yeah, we represented more countries than any other club in the world, which is pretty good in a way. It shows our diversity and the quality of the diversity we have in the squad. But let's reflect. So Romero, we'll talk about him first because he actually won the World Cup. So for him, what an 18 months. First, a Copa America winner, then a big money move to the Premier League with Tottenham, obviously on loan to start with, but now we've triggered that to make it permanent, and now a world champion with Lionel Messi, who some would say is the best player in the world. I say some because I have always preferred Cristiano Ronaldo. I think mainly because he's done it in more leagues. I don't think winning the World Cup is a reason to say that Messi is the GOAT, because it has to be done with a squad behind you. No one single-handedly wins the World Cup. I'm sure if Cristiano Ronaldo had been in this Argentina squad, they probably still would have won the tournament. So, yeah. After a shaky display in the first game against Saudi Arabia, which saw them actually it saw him, Romero, lose his spot in the next game, the 24-year-old then steadily improved and started every match after that. He put in an imperious performance in the final against France. Now it's time for him to push on with Spurs and get a bit more consistency in terms of his fitness, because he is becoming a bit of a Darren Anderton, a bit of a sick note in that squad already. Conte has massive plans for Romero, and we just need him to have the confidence to push on. He's a young lad, and I think this experience will definitely help him. 2 international cups in a very short space of time can only be of benefit for him as the player. Some of the things that Conte's been talking about him is his focus in games. We know it can be a bit hit and miss. He's always one tackle away from a red card, very much like we saw with Eric Lamela. It just must be an Argentinian thing. They're all a bit South American thing, not even Argentinian, a bit, shall we say, aggressive in the tackle, very passionate on the pitch. So, he has called for him to be to have a bit more focus, and he can be a top player. So congratulations to him. Second up of our winners list, even though he didn't win the World Cup, Hugo Lloris. He had a really good tournament, stood on the brink of becoming the first male captain to lift the World Cup in back-to-back tournaments. It wasn't to be, as we know what happened, but that shouldn't detract from Lloris's performances across the month of football. So the France and Spurs captain was picked up publicly by English media as the weak link in Didier Deschamps' team, but he responded on the pitch with an impressive display and goal against Gareth Southgate's men, and he was again in control against Morocco as he took away a clean sheet. The final was a bit of a step too far for France, but there's a few reasons for that. They had a bit of an illness that had gone through camp. It was evident in the final they looked a bit sluggish and tired until they got their goal to get them back into the game. But he made some big saves still, unable to do much about Argentina's clinical goals. For him, very, very positive tournament overall in what might be his last appearance at the World Cup. He has every chance of going to the next Euros, but World Cup, I don't think there will be any more. So just to put it into context, right, he is France's all-time capped player now. I think his first appearance for France was when he was 21 years old. He will be turning 36 soon. But in that time, he came to Spurs in the Premier League for 7.8 million. Now that sounds like an absolute bargain. 7.8 million. To think, if we were to replace him right now, we'd be looking at a minimum of 40 million. Right, the amount of money he saved us over the years. He's been our number one for such a long time. He's been at Spurs for over a decade, 10 years and 4 months, and he's been our number one pretty much the whole time. The only time we ever see him replaced is through injury. He doesn't really get dropped. Yes, he's kicking. We know, a bit of a problem, but he's come out himself and said about the kicking. Bigger teams like Tottenham, teams tend to go at us, put more pressure under, press a lot higher, and that forces them to have to, deal with these situations, puts them under a bit more pressure, and, things go wrong sometimes. But Nuno came in, and he got rid of Hart, we know that, and he actually wanted Lloris to be replaced. And then Conte came in and was like, absolutely not, pushed for Spurs to get him a new contract. And as I said, he was great against some of the teams in the World Cup, especially against us. England made some good saves. But 145 appearances for France now, absolutely sensational. And apparently they were talking about how much of a leader he was at half-time against England and really rallied them. So great for him. Even Perisic is the next one to talk about, the 33-year-old Croatian that we got on a free transfer. Many people saying that we need to stop going for these older players, but, he had a great World Cup with his country as they once again overachieved for a nation of their size. And Perisic was in fine form throughout the tournament. He got 3 assists and 1 goal as Croatia finished third in that ridiculous third place playoff place that does nothing but alter the FIFA rankings. That's all it does. It's a waste of a game. I'm sure us as Spurs fans would have rather that game didn't happen and we get Perisic back earlier to guarantee him playing the game against Brentford, but we'll see what happens. But more about Perisic here. He created 6 chances for his teammates from the left-hand side and continues to roll back the years with his performances. Hopefully, he will continue to bring that back with him to Tottenham. Now, the next player we have to talk about is Richarlison. Wow, the Brazilian actually makes both lists here. He makes the winners list and losers list. He has to be among the winners just because of his 3 goals in 4 matches. He had the tournament of his dreams before Brazil made their exit. He scored arguably both the best and second best goals at the tournament. The best one was obviously his controlled flick and acrobatic volley against Serbia, and then his strike against Sonny South Korea, where dribbled the ball on his head 3 times before finishing off a great move, which was almost as good. However, yes, they were knocked out, and we'll talk about why he's a loser of the World Cup. Antonio Conte is also a winner, despite not being at the World Cup. He gets on the list because Richarlison's injury aside, he watched one of his players enjoy the ultimate success in football whilst also getting most of his key men back in good time for a little rest before the return of the Premier League season. So we know that Ben Davies and Bentancur picked up injuries. Davies is actually back. He's been seen in training, taking part in a rondo. I'll talk about that in a bit. And Bentancur looks like he's recovering from the injury that he picked up in Qatar. Don't know if he'll definitely be back. Well, he won't be back for the Brentford game because he is suspended anyway. But hopefully he'll be back for the game after that. So that'll be an earlier return than we thought for him. So Conte also managed to get the overworked players such as Højbjerg, Dyer and Kane back before he would have expected them to return. I think we'd have expected them to have gone further into the tournament, so he got them back a little bit earlier. Although with the latter there could be some man management that needs to be done in Harry Kane, which brings us on to the losers of the tournament. So Harry Kane, it seems harsh because he provided 3 assists, he scored twice at this World Cup, but unfortunately all that's, the focus is just going to be on the skied penalty that would have kept him in our quarter-final against France. Would we have gone on to win the game? Who knows? But look, the 29-year-old striker admitted it's going to take him some time to get over that moment and the defeat. But his Tottenham teammates have already said that Kane's strong mentality will mean he'll take out his hurt on the Premier League defences in the weeks and months to come. Hopefully. But look, I don't want to talk too much about Kane. Don't want to get on his back. Can happen to anyone. Lewandowski couldn't even score a penalty in the group stages of a World Cup. So in this kind of situation, not going to get on his back. Without his goals, we might not have even been at the World Cup. So, yeah. Richarlison, let's move on to him again. So he makes it onto the losers list, and that's because of the hamstring injury that he picked up during the quarterfinal defeat to Croatia. It's an injury that will keep him out for a total of 5 to 6 weeks. Suggestions from Qatar were actually that Richarlison picked up the injury during the warm-up for the game and then went on to play 84 minutes in that encounter, which in hindsight doesn't seem to have been the best choice by whoever made that decision, because ultimately they went out of the World Cup anyway. But they obviously thought that Richarlison was a better option than Gabriel Jesus. It's crazy. With an injury in a warm-up, you'd think they would have made the decision to start Jesus, give Richarlison a bit of time to recover throughout the game, and then throw him on towards the end if they needed him. But they made that decision from an international standpoint. I'm sure the Brazil fans felt it was the right decision as well. From a selfish Spurs point of view, I kind of wish they hadn't taken the risk. Now, Højbjerg is the next loser on the list. Højbjerg actually said after Denmark's exit from the group stages, a World Cup that didn't go as expected. It's a great wake-up call for us to be reminded that we can only compete with the biggest and large nations if we push and perform to our limit as a group. We didn't manage to do so this time, so we can only learn, grow and punch back harder than ever to make sure we reach our full potential and make the country proud. We will be back. So for a man who was a creative force in the Euros and has weighed in with his fair share of goals and assists for Spurs this season, the midfielder wasn't really able to spark anything in Denmark. They only scored 1 goal in their 3 matches before heading home. Really disappointing. And then the other man on the list is Rodrigo Bentancur. Again, harsh this time on Bentancur. He impressed for Uruguay, but he is a loser in the sense that it was an unsuccessful tournament for the 25-year-old, and after his wonderful start to the season with Tottenham. Not only did Uruguay go out in the group stages of the World Cup after a dramatic last day in their group, but the midfielder also suffered a small tear in his adductor muscle on his right leg just 33 minutes into the final game against Ghana, which ended his involvement. There is hope that he'll be fit for the New Year's Day game against Villa. And as I said, he's suspended for the Brentford game. But actually, had he not picked up the injury, it might have been a different story on the last day of their World Cup journey. And he was having a good tournament on a personal level. But yeah. So that is that from the World Cup. We'll move on to some transfer stories now. And I'm just going to brighten up my screen a little bit. There we go, that's better. Some transfer stories. So, talking of Hugo Lloris and people thinking that maybe he was the weak link in the France squad, we've been linked with a few goalkeepers. There's been some great performances in the World Cup. Martinez for Argentina would be one. Some penalty stops in the tournament. Did himself a lot of justice throughout the tournament. Bit of a nut job, but I mean, most goalkeepers are. I've known a few in my time. They are a special breed, goalkeepers. But look, he's a sensational goalkeeper. It didn't quite work out for him at Arsenal. He's matured late into a fantastic goalkeeper. Had a brilliant tournament. Another goalkeeper that we keep getting linked with is England's Jordan Pickford. And there's also claims that people from Tottenham have had talk with the Everton stars' entourage. Those claims are coming out of France. And that's where, they're talking about Hugo Lloris turning 36 years old in the coming days. And it may be coming towards the end of his time with Tottenham. I don't see why it has to be. I think Lloris has still got another couple of years left in him. But yeah, Everton's Jordan Pickford is on our radar once again. He's a good goalkeeper. In terms of English goalkeepers, he's got the best stats in the Premier League, and he's definitely up there for his save percentages and stuff. And, he's at Everton. It's a side that's not particularly great. He'll want to push his career on, and I'm sure if he gets told he'll be our number one, then yeah, he'd come. Could he be the successor? I'm not sure. Another one that we're potentially being linked with, and I think this is more of the fans saying it, is Sommer. I think he's a fantastic goalkeeper. Could be one to look at, keep an eye on. No strong links with that one, though. I think this is more fan-led. Next up, let's talk about one of the Argentinians that caught the eye at the tournament, and that is Brighton's Alexis McAllister. There are reports coming out that Antonio Conte could want him as early as January in. Now, Conte hasn't hidden the fact that, yes, he wants another defender. He also wants a creative player within the team. Now, McAllister had a fantastic tournament for Argentina. Brighton player, as we know, so we've seen him in the Premier League. He's 23 years old. He played a key role in Scaloni's men getting their hands on that trophy. He didn't look out of place whatsoever. He went into the tournament in good form for Brighton, scoring 5 times in the Premier League, but it appears that his incredible performances at the World Cup has prompted so many clubs to spark interest. Again, a lot of this is going to be agent-led and fan-led, and publications like this one. This is the Boot Room that are talking about this, and they're talking about reports from Calcio, Mercer to Webb, and La Interista. So there's a few publications. I don't know how reliable some of these are, but look, he had a good World Cup. Watching him in the final, he didn't look out of place with some of the world-class players that he's been around. There will be competition. Can we get him in? I'm not sure. The reports are saying that McAllister would cost around 30 million, but you'd imagine that Brighton would want a lot more for the Argentinian, particularly if he's going to leave in the January transfer window. The other thing as well is that after his World Cup performances, the stock will have risen a bit past the 30 million. Now he's actually won the tournament. Then you've also got to look at the fact that he's been playing well in the Premier League, and Brighton have lost a lot of key players recently. Like, they've done well in their recruitment since they've lost those players. Their new manager has come in and sturdied the ship, but I think Brighton will dig their heels in and try and keep him at least until the summer. But nonetheless, it's one to keep an eye on. Now, one that kind of came out of nowhere, because it's not really us that's been linked with him. Us and Liverpool are now apparently joining the race to sign 18-year-old Bundesliga star, and that is Yusufa Moukoko. I'm probably destroying that pronunciation. So he's a product of Borussia Dortmund, 18 years old. Chelsea are the club that have been linked with him the most, and they've been looking at him for quite a while. I've seen a lot of links about Chelsea over the last couple of years being linked with him. He was actually part of the German national squad that bowed out of the World Cup at their first possible hurdle, and he hardly played any football in Qatar. But as I said, he's been linked with Chelsea for quite some time. A young product of Dortmund. He's had an excellent run in their senior team in the first half of the season. He's been scoring and assisting goals, has vast attacking potential. So the German international, his contract actually expires in the summer, and there's been no sight of an extension. I think he wants to move. He wants to move on to the next level. He's scored 6 goals and assisted 4 times in 14 league games so far this season. For an 18-year-old, they are fantastic stats. He possesses good pace. So he'd be great trouble for the last line of defence in the Premier League. He's clever at finding space in and around the box. He can drop deep to link up play and loves a shot on goal. So there's a lot to like in this. However, Chelsea obviously had that nasty injury to Broha, and that's sent to keep him out for the rest of the season. So Chelsea are short on their attacking options for the number 9 position. They've only got Aubameyang and Havertz that remain viable options. And Aubameyang's only the real one of those two that is a number 9. So are we going to get him? I don't think so. It'll probably come down to a bit of a bidding war. Chelsea have obviously got more money than us. There's more of a chance of him starting games for them. So I don't think that one's going to happen. But if nobody gets him in January, there's no reason why we can't get him in the summer. So let's move on to... Now we'll stick with transfers. Why not? Let's not move on to anything else. So... Anthony Gordon is a player that has been linked a lot with Spurs. Well, a lot with many clubs. Apparently, Conte thinks he's a special player. He really wants him at Tottenham Hotspur, and that's according to journalist Paul Brown. So we were linked with a mood for him in the summer. We actually tried to do a double deal of 100 million for Anthony Gordon and Richarlison. Obviously, it didn't happen. We only managed to get Richarlison. Gordon was made to stay at Everton. He got off to a decent start in the Premier League this season with Everton, and is currently their top goal scorer in the Premier League. I mean, it's not great. It's 3 goals, so it's nothing to really get overly excited about. 3 goals, but the stumbling block that we could face, it would be the price tag. That, you know, they want a lot of money from him. Certainly impressed at Everton over the past year under Frank Lampard. Was recently clocked as the fastest player in the Premier League this season. Yeah, I mean, he stood out in what is an underwhelming team. Like, they've not been great, so he's managed to make himself look good in and amongst that. And normally you don't get this. It's a bit of a difficult one. You normally see like these good players struggle and get pulled down, but he certainly hasn't. But, you know, they've struggled, Everton, in scoring goals this season. He's not the finished article yet. He's far from it. He's very raw at this stage. Everton are probably going to look at about 60 million for him. That's what they're going to demand. And that's pretty much thanks to Chelsea putting the price up with their interest. But if it is true that Conte really wants him at Tottenham, they've got to back him. He's a man that wants backing. So... yeah, the next player we'll talk about is somebody that had a fairly decent tournament in the World Cup, and that is Denzel Dumfries. It's not the first time we've been linked with him. Fabrizio Romano actually thinks that we could find it tough to land the World Cup star. He signed for Inter Milan only in 2021, established himself as their number 1 right back. He's made 65 appearances for them now. He's also the main man in that position for the shirt on the international stage as well. So what Romano has said is it's absolutely not close. He's been linked with Manchester United and Tottenham, but the situation is complicated as the player is happy at Milan. At this stage, it would take a really huge bid for any club to sign him. At 26 years old, he is approaching his prime. Clearly, Conte is keen to sign another right back. He's not really been convinced by Emerson Royale. I think the injury to Matt Doherty has kind of halted things a little bit for him, although we'll talk about the mid-season friendlies and why we could see a viable option in Matt Doherty now. And obviously Jed Spence's project for the future. However, cheaper alternative would be Sporting Lisbon's ace Pedro Porro. Been linked with him quite a lot in the last 2 weeks. Bola claimed that Tottenham are interested in bringing him to North London. He impressed against us in both the fixtures in the Champions League group stage. Real Madrid, Barcelona and Juventus are also thought to be keen. That creates a stumbling block because, that raises the price. Sporting apparently want 30 million euros, which equates to about 26 million pound English, or no deal will be done at all. It's a reasonable price for a player of his talent. Jermaine Genius actually hailed him as a different class. Porro will probably stay with Sporting until the end of the season, but there'll be a meeting in January to negotiate Porro's eventual exit. Now, this is where it could get interesting because Tottenham have done this a couple of times where we've seen us taking players on loan and sending them straight back across. So Pap Matassar was one of those players. We signed him and let him stay there. We're doing it right now with Destiny Udogie. So it's something that we've tried before, and it tends to get deals done because the teams don't want to lose the players partway through a season. So it kind of makes sense if we could offer that, possibly. He's actually been to the Premier League before. He joined Manchester City from Girona in 2019. Never made an appearance for the club. And then he spent 2 seasons on loan at Sporting before eventually making that a permanent move over the summer. Spain international has bagged 9 goals and 16 assists in 89 games for Sporting, and that attacking output might be exactly why Conte wants him at Tottenham. He looks like a player that would fit into the system. I'm not sure whether it's going to happen. It'll be an interesting one to look at. So, Napoli and Juventus apparently are going to provide stiff competition for Liverpool and Tottenham in the race for centre-back, and that is Benfica's teenager Antonio Silva. He's subject to interest from us and the 2 Italian clubs. The 19-year-old established himself in the heart of the unbeaten Eagles' defence this season. But yeah, he's another success story in the Portuguese league at the moment and somebody that we are looking at. I haven't seen too much of him myself. I'm just going off sort of what other people have been saying. It has seen him become a full international though. He started Portugal's final World Cup group match against South Korea last week. And former Liverpool defender Jamie Carragher has come out and spoken about him because of the links to Liverpool. And has said that he expects him to become a superstar after his remarkable start to the domestic Portuguese season. Apparently an unnamed English club has already made a 52 million bid for the youngster, but with more top clubs being alerted to his potential, the race to claim his signature could start as early as next month. Another player, and I don't think this one will happen, but it's worth talking about anyway, just in case, and that player is N'Golo Kante. So Fabrizio Romano, and obviously, we know he's fairly reliable in transfer stories, has said that he thinks that he will leave Chelsea. There's speculation that both us and Arsenal are keen to sign him. The well-respected journalist has reported that he's been informed that Kante is expected to leave at the end of this season, so it probably won't be a January deal, and that it's when his contract runs out. He's 31 years old now, got a great engine on him, brilliant defensive midfielder, puts himself about. The only way for Kante to stay is if Graham Potter decides to keep him. I think that what I'm hearing certainly is that Kante doesn't want to leave Chelsea, he very much wants to stay. He has a great relationship with all of his teammates, the fans love him, he loves the club. He loves London, so if he was to leave at the end of the season, I think he would want to go to another London club. If not, I think maybe moving abroad is a possibility for him, but I'm not so sure this one happens. Let's talk about one of our own players at the moment. Well, actually, let's talk about 2 of them. Harry Winks. Apparently, well, he's out on loan at the moment, hasn't actually featured at all, and that's because I don't know if he went over there injured, but apparently he hasn't been able to play or train in a long time without feeling any pain. He has started to take part in training sessions, has had his first training session where he felt comfortable with no pain. So it'll be interesting to see if he can, recover from his injury problems and have a decent season. And maybe that's what's held him back for Spurs. He's been uncomfortable. I know he's had a lot of ankle problems over the years, so maybe that's something that has held him back. And that's come to light a lot more recently, him being a bit more open about the pain that he has not being able to train. I know he's somebody that has a lot of injections and things, so hopefully he can get some football under his feet towards the rest of the season and come out on the other side. The other player I want to talk about is Joe Rodon. Yeah, Joe Rodon. It's a bit of a strange one because it's almost like a criticism. I don't know how much of this will get back to Willow. Bit of hair poking out. I don't know how much of this will get back to Conte, but he's all but admitted that Spurs boss Antonio Conte hasn't spoke to him over his future, or even spoken to him at all really since he's been out on loan. There's also no real clear discussions as to whether Rennes will take up the 20 million option to buy him at the end of the season, or even if he'd be willing to stay in France. He actually impressed for Wales during their disappointing World Cup campaign. He attracted some strong praise from various quarters as a result. But it still seems as if Conte is not one of the fans of the defender. It's a bit hard, really. I feel sorry for him. He's another one of these players a bit like Tanganga, where both of them had incredible talent and looked like they could be a future of our defence. But the issue we've got is Tottenham are always at that interim stage where we're on the brink of becoming a superpower in English football. We're on the brink. We're knocking on the door. And to do that, it means these youngsters, it's hard for them to get the game time. And it's not they're not good defenders. It's just when you've got, players around them, like for Tanganga, it was Alderweireld and Vertonghen kind of in the way. And then we brought in Romero and, he's fantastic. Then Eric Dyer decided he wanted to move back in defence and has been fairly solid. Now we're playing with a back three. Ben Davies all of a sudden is a centre-back. So there's all these players that are then blocking him. So, Joe Rodon must have been gutted when Conte came in the door and wanted to play with a back three, and we all know and we all agree Ben Davies is much better as a left-sided centre-back. So Ben Davies ultimately is blocking the progression of Joe Rodon at Tottenham Hotspur. So what he's actually said himself is about his future is I have no idea. That's what he said. It's up to Rennes. All I can do is perform, give my best, and we will see. When asked if he's spoken to Conte, his answer was quite diplomatic. It was, he's a very busy man. Yep. He said, they are in the Champions League and they are non-stop. There are people in the club who deal with me. He sent his wishes, which I was very happy to receive. But yeah, life in France actually appears to be suiting him quite well. And he's not the first Swans Academy product to have a good time in France. He said, the French league is very technical with technical players. The physicality of the Premier League is very big, and maybe there is a difference, but the French league is also very competitive. It's not. It's really not very competitive. We know who the winners of the league are pretty much going to be every season. But he said, we are doing very well. The club is in Europe as well, and we play against different teams in different countries, and it's going to make me a better player and give me extra experience of playing in different locations. Hopefully that continues when we return from the World Cup, and it's going to be a successful season. I mean, he's been linked with moves to other Premier League clubs, and I'm sure that if Rennes don't decide to take up the option, he will find a place in the Premier League. I do think he's a Premier League standard defender, just maybe not in the top four. But I don't think that's any fault of his own. I think that's our fault for kind of blocking the progression. So that's it for transfer. Now let's move on to I keep calling them pre-season friendlies. They're not. They're mid-season friendlies. What we are talking about here is the 4-0 win versus Motherwell, and we also had the 3-1 win versus Peterborough under-21 side. Now, Peterborough under-21s, you might say, what's so special about Peterborough under-21s? well, it's a match at the end of the day. It gets minutes under belts. It gets people back from injury and things like that. So the game against Motherwell, the lineup for that game, start with goalkeeper, work my way through. So you had Austin in goal, Tanganga, Sanchez, Sayers, Spence, Doherty, Bazuma, Skip, Kulusevski, White and Hill. And interestingly, White has been taken up, Harvey White that is, has been taken up a false nine role. Something completely different for him, because normally he's a lot further back in a defensive holding midfield role, if you will. Now in that game, there were goals from Kulusevski and Brian Hill, and 2 from Matt Doherty. The assists, 2 for Kulusevski, 1 for Hill. And what's interesting, Kulusevski, he's come back from his injury and obviously started well in the Premier League, back from injury. He's continued that form into these games after the little break that the players were given. But more impressively, Doherty getting 2 goals. He started on the left, then moved on to the right, had a fairly decent game. I know Motherwell are not the best opposition, but still, Doherty is looking sharp. He's looking very sharp. It doesn't matter who the opposition is. It's confidence for him. It's game time. And it doesn't matter who you play. If you're sharp, you're sharp. You know, whether you get the chances to score the goals or not. But you can tell whether somebody's running well and playing well. So that's great from that point of view. Subs to take note of that came on. Pascozzi. He's the young lad that is a full international for Estonia and has played quite a few games already. He actually picked up quite a bad injury and he's back to the point where, you know, some people didn't even know he was at Tottenham anymore and thought we'd got rid of him. We have not. He is back, so that's good. The other one is Alfie Whiteman. He came on in the second half to play in goal. He's back from his loan. And the other player is Lancashire, the young lad that we signed in the summer. He's been training with the first team whilst the World Cup has been on and getting some minutes. So the next game was the 3-1 victory over Peterborough under-21s. The goals in that game came from Harvey White, Brian Hill and Matt Doherty at it again. Assists, there is no surprise to see Kulusevski back on the assist trail. Sanchez technically got one from a corner, and Brian Hill. So Hill in those friendlies got 2 goals and 2 assists. Doherty came out with 3 goals. Kulusevski got a goal and 3 assists. Pretty impressive. So we'll take that. Yes, Peterborough under-21s obviously not going to be as good opposition even as Motherwell, but things to take from that game is Doherty has been playing on the left to cover for the fact that Sessegnon had been injured. Perisic is at the World Cup. Reguilon's obviously out on loan. Spencer's been getting some good minutes actually at right wing back because of that. He got 70 something minutes in the first game and then 82 minutes I want to say in the Peterborough game, so it's a good sign. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Longley was also back in action after coming back from his injury, and then Pap Matassar is back from the World Cup and he actually came on the 69th minute, so he got some action, which is quite nice. What should we talk about next? Injuries. So Ben Davies, I spoke about earlier, seems to be recovered earlier than expected, back in training. Forster hadn't been seen in any of the... Well, he hasn't played in any of the games. He picked up a knock, but he is back in training. Bentancur, obviously, I said, still injured. Lucas Moura has still not been seen in any of the training videos or anything like that. I think his injury is still affecting him. Emerson Royale, he's back from his knock. Sessegnon was seen... so there was a video put out on Twitter, and it looks like Sessegnon was the player in the background training alone. He was actually injured late against Forest in the cup game. The third place playoff in the World Cup could mean that we don't see Perisic straight away, which means Doherty could actually cover the left-hand side as he has been in the friendlies. Sonny's been seen in training. He's still wearing his mask and been talking to South Korean media saying that will probably be on for some time. And then the other one, Højbjerg, has been seen in full training. So on the injury front, it's not too bad. Oh, and obviously we spoke about Richarlison, but as he'll be back midway through January, I can't see us doing anything to replace him, especially with Sonny fit enough to play and Kulusevski in good form. It all depends on what happens with Kane, to be honest. and how he comes back from the World Cup. Let's talk about the training session. So there was a rondo, and for those of you that don't know much about football training, a rondo is essentially a load of players around the edge with players in the middle. Most of the time you do a rondo with 1, 2 or 3 players in the middle. Professional football clubs use rondos with lots of players in the middle, and the way Conte does it is you're essentially you're a team on the outside, you're a team in the middle. They make it very compact to mimic real game situations. Now that was ferocious. There were slide tackles going everywhere. There was players getting annoyed with the coaches when they weren't given the win from their little mini rondo games. Very high intensity, but afterwards the players seemed in good spirits. There was lots of laughing and joking. So the winning team, and this happens at most clubs, the players that win their little training things tend to go and have their photo with the club photographer. I think Ben Davies tripped up, or pretended to trip up, Matt Doherty, who went down to the ground joking and laughing. Whilst the lads were trying to have their photo taken, the sore losers from the game were trying to throw balls at them. We saw Emerson Royale threw his bib off and tried to sneak into the winning team, as did Jed Spence. So look, despite the fact that they were all in each other's faces and flying around in training, they were very much behind each other. They're in good spirits. So hopefully the rest of the players coming back from the World Cup, Perisic, the England lads, Lloris, and my screen's just timed up. There we go. Lloris and Romero. Hopefully they come back all in high spirits as well. No injuries there, fingers crossed, and all goes well. So that is it for today. A long video, yes. 42 minutes and counting. So I hope you enjoyed that one. Apologies that it went on for so long, but there was a lot to talk about. So I hope you enjoyed it. I really want to hear your thoughts in the comments below about anything we've spoken about, but also I really want to hear about who you think had a good World Cup from not our players, people that you would like to see in the Spurs shirt. Who shall we sign based on their World Cup performances, or even who shall we sign that wasn't at the World Cup? So thanks for sticking around. Leave your comments below. I will be picking out players that you guys mention in the comments to talk about in the next video. So make sure you get them in there. You will get your mention for suggesting the players. I have been Kieran from Speaking Spurs. It is good to be back. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment. And until next time, come on you Spurs.